Help protect us from racism and xenophobia by becoming an I Love Black People ambassador today. Join on iloveblackpeople.com. No matter where you are in the world, join us today and get access to the I Love Black People network. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.
And welcome to another episode of I Love Black People. We've been blessed today to have an amazing, courageous sister that's really doing more than work. She's doing a mission for our people, and it may be focused on the state for now, but it impacts really the world. I just want to welcome an amazing sister, Camila Moore, for joining us today. Thank you, Camila, and please let our folks know who you are and this amazing work you're doing with this task force.
Thank you so much, Bro Sinclair. My name is Camila Moore, and I am the chairperson for the California Reparations Task Force. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, South Central to be exact, and I went to UCLA for undergrad. I took a couple of years between undergrad and law school to teach, and then I went to Columbia Law School for law school. And I also attended University of Amsterdam to obtain a Master of Laws degree in International Criminal Law, where there I studied and wrote a thesis on reparatory justice, or rather global reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade, the institution of slavery, and their legacies, particularly as it impacted Black Americans, Black Brazilians, Black Colombians, and folks in the Caribbean. And so since graduating from law school, I applied to the California Reparations Task Force, given my experience as a reparatory justice scholar, and I was able to be accepted. So yes, I applied to the task force, and I was appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly, Anthony Rendon. And then after that, I was actually elected to be the chairperson by my fellow esteemed task force members. And so it's a 9-member task force, and the California Reparations Task Force has met since June of 2021. And we've held a series of virtual hearings on a series of issues, starting from the transatlantic slave trade and the institution of slavery, and the impetus and implications of the Great Migrations, inviting people to provide not only expert testimony, but personal testimony on these particular issues. The task force, since we've met in June, has held even more hearings, particularly on the more contemporary harms against African Americans as it relates to, for instance, redlining, denial of FHA loans, GI benefits, mass incarceration, and other badges and incidents of slavery. And so essentially, the task force has 2 years to not only study, but to also develop comprehensive reparations proposals for African Americans. And since we've met in June, we've been discussing, right, this contentious issue of eligibility. Who should be eligible for reparations in the state of California? Many of the task force members believe that all Black Californians, regardless of immigrant or national origin, I should say, should be eligible for reparations due to the impacts of systemic racism in this country of all Black people. And there are some people in the task force who endorsed a lineage-based approach. So that means that reparations would be entitled to the descendants or the direct descendants of enslaved Africans in the United States. And so at our last hearing in March, the task force made a historic decision, and we decided to define the community of eligibility determined by lineage. So if a person is a descendant of an enslaved chattel person or a free Black person who came to the United States prior to 1900, then they would then be eligible for reparations under this plan that we've adopted, with the understanding that if you do have an ancestor potentially that met that criteria, then their future generations or their progeny, including yourself, most likely went through the discriminatory policies that I just mentioned earlier, that reparations are I guess, for lack of better words, reparations are supposed to be adhered to address to those harms. And so
That's no. I think what you're saying is so helpful, and I think it's important that we have these conversations. I think it used to be like these conversations weren't being discussed too many places. I know HR 40. Again, I go back to the Encobra days, and we didn't know what was going on, and it just took 30 years just to study something. And I think in those days, again, we had C-SPAN, but we didn't have social media. There wasn't a real way besides just to trust what Conyers, and again, God rest his soul, and others were telling us. And it just seems like there was a time where they even said to us, "We don't rock the boat because these folks have seniority." There was a whole bunch of reasons why my generation, I think, missed it. And I'm so glad that there's a fresh new energy that's come around this issue that now is even talking to the level of detail. Like, again, we were, folks who just wanted, liberation. There wasn't a lot of, discussion of the details. And most of our friends and family didn't think we would ever get it anyway. So you were always like a weirdo. They weren't like task force, like it wasn't like real like it was kind of funny. It wasn't even like real folks. It was always like we were like the marginal folks. They were talking real stuff over here, like welfare reform, criminal justice. You brought up reparations. You was like talking about going to Mars. Like, what are you talking about? So I think at first I just respect so much that what you said and what you're doing is now something that's being put on the record. There's a budget for it. There's real folks with real skills and a real interest. Again, I think as you showed and demonstrated in your task force, there's people with different positions and opinions, but there's a serious conversation about us getting reparation. Now, again, I was about to say getting that check. I'm one of those folks with the check. But again, I'm saying, even if we disagree, the fact that now it's a substantive, real conversation that's leading to real action, what do you see now? What are some of the things that, inspire you about the space? What are some of the things that give you pause? This is a lot on your shoulders. And again, I know you're on the shoulders of our ancestors and so many other people helpful, but I'm going to give you your flowers here, sister. I at least heard one of your sessions, and you about that business. You're very serious about us, and you're very rigorous. And I respect that. Again, I'm not rigorous. I'm kind of all over the place. And that's why the best I can do is probably a radio show, sitting there and listening to folks talk crazy to me will get me crazy. So I appreciate your poise. Tell me again some of the things that really you see, getting done, and some of the things you might see as obstacles that needs to be, addressed. What are your thoughts on the ongoing process?
Yes. So again, now that the community of eligibility situation or issue is settled, where the task force has decided to go with lineage versus race-based reparations, I see this as a potential rallying point, not only for the task force members, but for the community at large. Since the news came out that the task force voted for lineage-based reparations, now I've been seeing so many different allies from, white people saying that they're willing to volunteer their time to help Black people trace their genealogy. I'm hearing my Black immigrant brothers and sisters praising the decision and saying that we're going to come for France as Haitians, we're going to come for the UK as Jamaicans. And so just personally, it's very gratifying for me because, as I said earlier, I literally wrote a thesis about the global reparatory justice movement for the transatlantic slave trade and institution of slavery for all people of African descent. Understanding that there's particular strategy that you have to, utilize in order to really make it happen and see it happen. And so, I'm looking forward to the next phase in this movement, particularly for the task force in terms of, okay, now that we have the eligibility settled, what are the forms of reparations? What would they look like? That's the next phase. And in terms of obstacles, I guess the obstacles would be, I think, like an education campaign, because I think there's a lot of miseducation about a lot of things, about one, California's role and complicity in maintaining the institution of slavery, I think the common retort when people find out that California has a reparations task force, they ask why, because California was admitted to the Union as a free state or never had slavery. And, while they were admitted to this free state in name, there was no hiding place for slavery in this country. Still isn't, if you think about the 13th Amendment and mass incarceration. But
so we're talking about the issues that might make it difficult. I think it's amazing that you brought up the point that some people will say, was this a free state? Now, I don't even know what if it was or not, but the fact that you added that, super brilliant, just shows you're well read. What is the response to that? And it seems as you're saying that in general, it was never a safe place for us as a people. To this day, we know that to be true. What are some of the other things that I think this is a great part of it, that you're talking about the education. What other things you think are education factors that will help people understand the relevance of this task force and what you're trying to do?
Great. Yes, thank you. So again, from the public facing side, we're not talking about Black people. We're having an external conversation about what this task force is about. Again, I think an education campaign would be useful in terms of California's complicity in maintaining the institution of slavery. But in terms of the internal conversation amongst Black folks about this task force, I think, again, there's going to have to be a simultaneous education campaign amongst Black folks to kind of elucidate how this task force could be incredibly unifying, or has already been incredibly unifying rather than divisive. Because I think in terms of like the external conversation, when we're talking about California's complicity in slavery, people will say, oh, well, California wasn't a slave state. And that's not necessarily true. But in the internal conversations, the common retort I'm hearing from some Black folks is that, okay, would a lineage-based standard be divisive? Like, didn't Black immigrants deal with systemic racism too, and therefore they should be eligible for reparations for slavery and Jim Crow and the new Jim Crow? And I don't want this task force to be a source of division. I want this task force to be a source of unity that's seen to be in alignment with the global reparatory justice movement in the same ways in which CARICOM is, fighting for a lineage-based or lineage-specific reparations claims from their former colonial masters, and the African Union is doing that as well. Just last month, actually, Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, as the co-chair of CARICOM's reparations subcommittee, literally just drafted or co-drafted a letter with some officials from the African Union to renew demands for reparations from their former enslavers and colonizers. And so, I see the historic decision that the California Reparations Task Force came down to on Tuesday as, like I said, in alignment with what's happening with CARICOM and the African Union and the global reparatory justice movement for people of African descent at large. So that's the framing that needs to happen.
Yeah, and I didn't know, and again, I think part of this language that's changed throughout the years. Again, back in the early 90s, even the term African American was quite new. So even I looked at some of the old legislation, it seems like it was kind of like a snapshot. We had just been stopped calling each other Black, this new term African American. And now I hear people, well, that includes people who just came. And let me just say this, I've been to over 60 countries. I have never heard somebody from another country say they want some of their money too. But I have heard it now, like in people debate, we got to make sure this is and that. And again, since I'm a Pan-Africanist, the folks that I deal with are already pro, like, get your paper, I'm gonna get my paper. Like, no one's like, I'm trying to get your, but the people we used to have to deal with were actually other descendants who were like, nah, we're not gonna get, like, I saw most of the conversations within my own family, and all of us are descendants in my family saying, nah, man, you just need to get a job, or nah, this ain't gonna happen. So when I heard the immigrants were coming to get us, again, I'm going to the top, of course, it's not gonna get it was a nuance to it. And then I saw people bringing up how some of the spokespeople who were in spaces, their background was not from here. And then I started realizing it's not just my cousins and and relatives who were acting like there was reparation thing didn't make sense. There was now maybe people who were surrogates or being used. And I tell people, like, literally the Congressional Black Caucus, and especially back when I'm talking about, they were almost all descendants of enslaved Africans, and they were playing games with us. Like, they literally made it seem, even when we had the Democratic House, they did not make reparation. HR 40 was something they would like bring out just to get us to come out and vote again. Well, look, you need us, and here's HR 40. And there was another bill about jazz. They would use these bills that was like targeted to us, but they would never pass anything. Like, it would never get out of the Judiciary Committee. Like, literally, it was, and we didn't even know the difference between being a Judiciary Committee, on the floor, like there was on the wall, like we had no context of it. The fact that, you know, you've even spent your academic career focused on reparations is almost like a validation. Like, you know, you could have picked all kinds of subjects, but you chose us, our own people, to study what was done. Meaning, I'm only saying that because people go to law school all the time. They study, you know, I went to Howard University, a lot of Howard law folks, you know, they study, you know, corporate law, you know, civil. You literally went across the pond. And again, I've been to Amsterdam and I wasn't studying. I promise you, I'm not gonna get into my background, but literally I didn't go there looking for a repertory, nothing. So the fact that you made this a huge part of who you are, and I think it's, again, I don't think it's about everybody agreeing on everything. I think it's like what you did in your committee. It's about people being able to express their differences and their thoughts and still be a human being, and that's not vilifying or making people, you know, again, I'm not going to get into slaps or making jokes about people's wives, but whatever we do, even if it's wrong, we as a people need to be able to have a space where we're able to, as traumatized people, you know, what they say, hurt people do hurt folks. So how do we like figure this out without me trying to scratch your eyes out and call you names? And I just think the fact that you've even given so much of the opportunities of advancement for yourself to focus something as narrow and specific as, you know, the hundreds of years of our oppression, we need to be thankful. If we don't say that, I'm saying thank you. I'm a mechanical engineer. I didn't spend no time on this issue besides, you know, saying rah, rah, rah. I didn't go to no school, take no test, pass nothing. You know, so I'm coming at this from a very different position than you. So looking at that education, where do you think people can go if we want to help people with the education?
Yes, absolutely. So first, you can always go to our website, the California Reparations Task Force website, which is oag.ca.gov/AB3121. You can follow me on Twitter at Camila V. Moore. You can also search the hashtag AB3121. Stay tuned for more updates. Our next meeting actually is April 13th and April 14th, and it'll be our first in-person hearing. And it's going to be in San Francisco at Vice Chair Brown's church, Third Baptist Church. And yes, stay tuned for more information in terms of a public education campaign.
Okay, I think that's awesome. And now, what are the deadlines of this committee? I mean, I guess that'd be interesting. Like you said, 2 years. So you guys got to come up with, this is a lot of work. So literally, what's the end product look like? Or can you say, or do you envision?
Yes, so in terms of deadlines, so as of now, in terms of how the statute is written, the task force has up until July 2023 to send proposals to the legislature. And so June of this year, we're actually launching the first part of a 2-part report. And so this June 2022 report will be over 600 pages long and will pretty much detail everything that we've discussed since we've met in June of 2021. And in terms of detail, it'll document all the harms against African Americans, starting from the transatlantic slave trade to present. And then the following year, as I said, July 2023, we'll have a second report which will contain the final recommendations that we will then hand over to the legislature for adoption. But also keep in mind that there's a task force member who's an elected official, Reggie Jones-Sawyer, who just introduced a new bill to extend the life of this California Reparations Task Force by 1 year. So right now, we're only supposed to be meeting until July of 2023. But if member Reggie Jones-Sawyer's new legislation passes, we'll be meeting until June of 2024. And I believe his rationale behind extending the life of the task force is, if the task force sunsets at June 2023, we'll no longer be able to meet. And so I think his argument is that, when we start rolling out proposals, we're still going to want to have the power to meet so that we can, publicize our final proposals and rally people around it.
Wow. That sounds like a journey. Okay. And so are you doing this full time, or you got to do something else? Because that seems like a lot of years for you. Again, this is a noble cause. I think this is God's gift. Praise God. Hallelujah. Is this a full-time thing that you'll have to do while we're going through this?
Well, I'll say that it is a volunteer position, so no task force members are getting paid. It has been a full-time job for me where I've had to kind of sacrifice some things in order to make this work. So we'll see. But right now it is definitely full-time.
A full-time volunteer. So we need to let folks know that, again, when people talk about all this election stuff and voter participation, and literally there's more to politics than going to vote. Sister Kamilah, you're literally an example of what it takes for us to take control and have sovereignty, because waiting for somebody else to come save us, they're not coming. And the fact that you are volunteering and contributing to this in a very substantive way. Again, I said thank you before, but super duper duper thank you for your commitment and the volunteers of the task force, yourself, and as well as everyone else who's literally contributing at this level. I think is amazing. And I think, just a shout out to our listeners, this task force probably going on in everyone's jurisdiction. They just may not have been invited or had an opportunity to apply. We need to make sure that we're alert and aware of these task force and the decisions that are being made on our behalf and our interests. So with that being said, you said there's another meeting coming up. And when do y'all get to the check part? Excuse me. When do you get to the compensation for the things that have been done wrong? How does that, or is that in the scope of what you guys are going to be discussing also?
Yes, that's definitely within the scope, because by law, and that's also in the statute, any proposals that we come up with in terms of reparations must comport with international law standards. And under international law, reparations comes in 5 forms. And so one of those 5 forms is compensation. So we're actually legally required to seriously consider and even offer some sort of compensation in our proposals. And so that's why we actually hired an economic consultant team, which comprises of 3 economists, one of which is Dr. William Darity from Duke University, also William Spriggs, who served in Obama's Labor Department and is the chief economist for the AFL-CIO. There's also a local economic professor, Professor Casey Campbell, along with Thomas Kramer, who's not an economist by training, but he's a professor of public policy at the University of Connecticut. And he has written extensively on reparations for slavery and has crunched some numbers even. And then we also have, lastly but not least, Kristen Mullen, who is William A. Darity's partner and co-author of the book that they wrote together, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. And so those 5 people serve on our economic consultant team, and they are tasked with essentially, for in layman's terms, crunching the numbers or calculating any potential forms of compensation, particularly for state-specific harms that could range from, where you're a victim of war on drugs, redlining, housing discrimination, police violence. This is all stuff that we actually just started discussing at our last hearing this March. But again, this will be an ongoing conversation. So I anticipate that the economist team will be meeting with us literally every single meeting that we'll be having moving forward. The in-person hearing, our first in-person hearing at their Baptist church in San Francisco on April 13th and 14th, it will be live streamed, and you can catch the live stream on our website, oag.ca.gov/AB 3121. The agenda is already on the website, and you'll be able to also give public comment telephonically. So you don't have to be there in person in order to provide public comment.
All right. Well, thank you, sister. Thank you for all what you've been doing. And as I always leave out, I am because we are, and definitely Kamilah, because of you, I am, and I'm definitely see the opportunity for us to get the justice we deserve. Thank you, thank you, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Help protect us from racism and xenophobia by becoming an I Love Black People ambassador today. Join on iloveblackpeople.com. No matter where you are in the world, join us today and get access to the I Love Black People network. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.